Welcome everyone to another event that we like to call Being at Home with George during time of COVID. And in this week, as usual, I'm going to talk about the possibility of being able to hold the hurt and generate the hope. And the thing that I want to focus on this week is generating more hope. And part of that begins with the self. It begins with me, with I. And when I think about this journey we've been on, I feel the need to focus on myself, to do a little more self-care or self-reflection. And I'd like to frame the conversation around the book called The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm, who was this psychoanalyst who had concentration on what they call existential, or the art of being, dealing with the just how do we live in a way, how do we need to be in a way to do what we say we want to do. And so last couple of weeks I've been talking about shifting from doing to being, and so now it's part of that generating the hope, part of that being. It starts off with this idea of self-knowledge. And I've been talking about the concept that Socrates mentioned when he said the unexamined life is not worth living. Of course, we want to shift that to the examined life is most definitely worth living. And so what we're examining now is this idea of beginning with self, not ending with oneself, but beginning with self, because we have to nurture, we have to provide nourishment for the self so that the self can be available and helpful to other selves. And so in The Art of Loving, he talks about four aspects of the having a productive orientation, which is what love does. Love is a verb, is more about making what one loves grow. And so if we're talking about self-love, and we're talking about this idea of self-knowledge. So I have to know myself. And why do I need to know myself? I need to know myself to the degree that I could be able to understand what my needs are. So self-care, knowing that food, clothing, shelter obviously is important, but there's emotional needs, there's spiritual needs, there's mental needs. And so for me, the self-care, what do I need now? What do I need to do to be able to be present with myself, to be fully engaged in the moment? And a lot of that has to do with some of things like when I'm hungry, I need to eat. I need to eat properly. When I'm sleepy, I need to sleep. But also I need to attend to myself. So there's the self-care of attending to the needs that I have and honoring them, and not being so giving to others that I'm neglecting myself, which I have a tendency to do. And I'm sure most folks do that, especially if you have little ones to take care of. And so we talk about self-care and self-responsibility. So I am responsible for my self-care. I'm responsible for it. That means that I have the capacity and the ability to respond to my needs. So when I need to eat, I can eat. When I need to sleep, I need to sleep. And when I need to have some quiet time, some space, when I need some rest, when I need to recover all of the energy I'm expending, and either if I'm sitting stationary too much, then I need to get out and move. So we talk about self-care, self-responsibility, self-knowledge we talked about. And then there's the self-respect, which is respecting how I need to do things so that I don't get hung up in shoulds. Like I should do this, I should do that. This is what so-and-so is doing. I need to get clear about what George needs to do for George. And so when we talk about these aspects of love, respecting who I am, respecting my inner greatness, I like to call it the masterpiece within, the Buddha nature, the Christ consciousness, that we have to be still and know. I have to spend time with myself and getting clear about what I need to care for, that I am responsible, and that I have to know myself and know how I need to do it. So I've been challenged because normally when I get to a point where I know I need some rest and relaxation, or I need to be able to recover, I normally go to Maine, to get to the coast of Maine, or southern coast of Maine, and that's where I go and I hang out for a couple of days near the ocean and pray and meditate, do whatever I need to do. But I'm not able to do that right now, so I have to be creative and actually seek places in Massachusetts where I can go and just chill, be near the water, and do things. For some of us, we don't have the resources or the opportunity to do that, so we have to figure out how to do that in the privacy of our homes. Maybe we go for a quiet walk. Maybe we sit and listen to music, or maybe we just sit and meditate, pray. But there is a need to be still. And it's interesting because I feel like even now, as you listen and participate in this video, by watching it, you can rest in your body. You can rest in the moment and just be focused on the here and now, with no need to do anything or to be anything, but just to be still and know, just to sit in the recognition of sitting and breathing and knowing it, the recognition that I'm just sitting and listening, so that we're able to start to apply, as they say when you get on a plane, to put the oxygen mask on yourself. That's what we need to do. We need to feed ourselves. We need to nourish ourselves through self-care, self-respect, self-responsibility, and self-knowledge. And that's one way of generating the hope, is yes, that we can self-regulate, we can take care of ourselves, we can acknowledge our needs. And it also means not being shy about asking for help. But even in the midst of asking for help, I'm also talking about the quiet time, the private time, having space for us to just be with ourselves without having to attend to others. Or even if we're alone, we don't get hung up in the shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be more active. I should be out protesting. Yeah, you can go out and protest. You can do what you need to do. But then when you get home, we need to be able to self-care, to have a little self-compassion, to recognize that, yes, we need to recover. We need to take care of ourselves. Every organization, every community, every family begins with the self, so the individual self. And so there's a book called The Way of Man by Martin Buber, and one of the chapters is titled To Begin with Oneself. And then there's another chapter that says to begin with oneself, but not to end with oneself. And so it's other people. And I like to use this saying that the best way to find myself is to forget myself and to be there for other people. And we've been talking about this in this series, about getting beyond the illusion of separateness and recognition of the whole person, mind, body, heart, soul, and spirit. And that we have to feed those. When I talk about self-care, when I talk about self-responsibility, self-respect, we have to feed those aspects of being. But at the same time, when we interact with other people, we need to see them as a whole person, with a body, with a mind, with a heart, with spirit or soul. And so taking care of myself, to begin with myself, not to end with myself. But I'm also talking about, a lot of us have forgot about ourselves and been serving others, whether it's protesting and being out there, or maybe doing some kind acts. And that's great, but we have to do the other part of it, which is the self-care. So we begin with ourselves, we don't end with ourselves. And so it's this getting beyond the illusion of separateness. When I help myself, even though I'm not out helping others, I'm actually helping others, because I'm creating more capacity for me to serve, for me to be present for others. So I begin with myself, but I don't end with myself. So for me, that means when I go out to the grocery store, or I go to the pharmacy, when I go out, I embrace the whole person in front of me. I speak to them, I smile, I just see them as a whole person. And on some level, I forget myself to find myself by just serving them, by just being patient, kind, caring, in spite of the fact that they may not be serving me to the level that I might like. But I can practice, self-care, which means caring for them, responsibility. I am responsible for myself and of being my brother's keeper, if you will. And there's also this idea of maybe just knowing that that's a whole person. And if I relate to them as a whole person, that I get beyond that illusion of separateness, and that there's a feeling of I and the other being one. So we begin with the masterpiece, with the Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, divine spark, Kuan-Yin energy. So we have that. And so this idea of self-love, self-compassion, self-care, self-respect, self-responsibility, and self-knowledge, that is a way of being with ourselves so that we can do what we want to do, but also how do we let that masterpiece express itself? And it starts with the self, but it also starts with seeing the other, self and other, and being able to live the greatest commandment, which is the part of it, the second part of it, is to love your neighbor as yourself. Of course, the first one being love God with all your mind, heart, and soul. And so the idea is once again, how do we deal with hate? How do we deal with unease? And how do we heal? We heal by being able to do the self-care so that we can actually rest in whatever we do. Even when we're active, we can come from a place of calmness, of steadiness, of lovingness, and just do what we need to do, but do it with a grace, do it with a sense of service. At least this is how I do it. And it helps me that even now I can rest in whatever I'm doing, whether I'm washing the dishes or going to the store and engaging with another person, that I can still rest in myself and rest in the idea that I have this divinity in me and that I can recognize the divinity in others.